Cool. Next step then, mash. Well, the mash is actually the part of the process in which you bring your water and the grist together. And the idea is to just mix them together and make some kind of porridge. So it really looks like porridge when you mash in. And the idea is to just hydrate the grist and so usually we use about 3 liters of water for 1 kilo of, a little bit more than 3 liters of water for 1 kilo of grist. If you use less, then it really becomes very thick. So it will still work. You will still extract the sugar and everything, but it will get quite thick. And you need to, especially if you go for a multiple step mash, you need to swirl it. You need to make it move in there. So I wouldn't suggest to go too low in terms of ratio of water and malt. And if you go too high, at the end becomes, I mean, you will have volume issues down the line. So stick to around 3. How much did we do for the recipe, David?
So we do 3 steps. We do a proteinase step at 52 that we use mainly to break down proteins. It has a lot of impact in from retention and to feed the yeast. Is very also important for your lautering if you do it properly. Then we have a saccharification rest for beta amylase to break down all of the starches. We do it at 62. Nowadays, with the malt specs that we are finding from our providers of malts, they suggest you to do these steps a bit higher. So 63, 64 will be ideal. So that's the most important when you extract a lot of beta amylase, and also makes you create a lot of simple sugars that make the beer drier. And Delta is a dry beer, like very crisp, very dry. And also we have a step at 72 for alpha amylase, again to break down a bit of starches, but it's very short. Actually, is good for the breakdown of the starch, and it gives a nice texture to the beer. And then we have a mash out just to kill all of the enzymes that we created during the mash, and that's it. That's what we suggest. But for example, if you don't have eating elements to make all of these steps, you can do a single step infusion, bit the way the English style of brewing is, just by letting infuse your mash at 62 degrees for 1 hour.
Yeah, I think the picture that is shared with you on the screen is not the mash for a Delta. It's just an illustration of what a multiple step mash is. So it means rising the temperature step by step, and between each of these rising steps you have what we call a rest, and it's just a duration that within that duration you'll have the enzyme working and breaking down the proteins and the sugar. And this is really critical because the brewer's yeast is not able to ferment those like complex sugar that you have into the grain, and you really need to break them down and make them more simple and more accessible for the yeast. As David said, indeed, if you cannot do those multiple steps, if you cannot heat your mash and make sure you control the temperature, then we highly recommend that you do just a single step infusion. And then
we forgot. Sorry, we forgot to mention that you should have your hot water prepared in advance.
Always heat up your hot water. And also as you're mashing in, if let's say you want to mash in at 52 degrees, if you have your water at 52 and then you put your grist in, the temperature of the water will drop a bit. So better to have it 55 and then mash in. It will stabilize around 52.
Yeah. If it 5 degrees higher.
Exactly. And if it drops to 51, I mean, no panic at all. It's great. It's fine. It's going to do its work just as fine. You're 1 degree off, but we're not talking about a big problem. It is a big problem though when it gets too hot too soon, because you need time for those enzymes to break down the sugar. And let's say you're targeting 62, so you want your amylases to start working, breaking down your sugar, and you actually fuck it up, and you let it rise to 80, and then you bring some cold water back, and then that's too late, because I mean, if you go too high in temperature, you actually deactivate the enzymes. So it's really important that you monitor. Exactly. So once you've gone too high in temperature, there's no mean. I mean, it's a bit pointless to come back and dilute with cold water and bring the temperature back down. So be really careful. But if you follow those steps, it should be flawless. And also, I think there was a lot of questions about why do we mash out actually? Because why do you want to kill those enzymes? I think if you don't have means of mashing out, it's fine. It's going to work. I think the mashing out is more of a matter of consistency, so that every time, so your mashing time, with including all of these steps, or whether even if you only do one step, it's always the same time, so you will always have the same composition of sugar altogether. It's a way of freezing, like you stop the transformation of the sugar, and you kind of freeze it, so it goes to the next step always the same way. And so how long does that take? It really depends, but I think you should allow an hour and a half to 2 hours to process to do all of this all together, including the time for rising the temperature. So you really have time at that point, and I think it's really important that at that point you already think of next step, and you get everything ready for next step.
Okay, well, before moving to the next steps, cheers, Antoine.
Thanks.
We have a few questions about the mashing process.
Yes.
First one from Samuel Lange is asking that for the machine we propose 2 options. He's asking us if we can advise us the best one, and if he has material to handle the steps, what major differences should we expect between the 2 options that we propose?
I don't know. I think single step infusion works fine, and if you're just beginning, just do that. It's going to work. I think it's less risky to go multiple step because you have more control of what you're doing. So if you're not sure about the quality of your malt, then it's always recommended that you go multiple step. It's actually, I think you'll do fine with just a single step infusion. But if you want to add more ways of control into what you're doing, if you get to a better understanding of what you're doing, and then you realize that later down the road you have foam stability issues, for instance, but then if you're doing multiple step mash, then you have a way of changing this. So I don't know what would be your recommendation, David? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think you said it. I think you said it in the beginning. I mean, the multiple step mash is very important if you want consistency, if you want to keep brewing the same beer over and over again. But again, nothing against the single step mash. I mean, it's just you have less control. That's all.
Yeah, it's also a bigger risk to mess it up. So if you're not sure about doing it right, don't do it. Maybe. Or take the risk to do it, but you take more risk of not making it right. Yes. But it's not rocket science. It's just if you follow the steps, it's just all good. There's you can also correct pH at that step. It's something you can also do. Bring the pH to around 5.4, 5.2, and
that's very important. We forgot to mention.
Yeah, so not as much for a Delta maybe, but some other recipe that you bring, roasted malts and stuff. They're really acidic, they're really sour, so they really change the pH. It also depends on the water you have, but that's one step further, I think.
Well, in Belgium, we like multiple steps. No, I think a single step is more like a British way to look at beers, and in Belgium there is this.
Yeah, indeed. I think Belgium and Germany we like to make it a bit more multiple step, but I think
but I think it's also very related with different grains used. You know, because there's a lot of tradition of using wheat and rye and oats that require those steps to break down all of those proteins. But for IPAs, for example, is super common in American brewing and English brewing to do single step infusions, just straightforward, you know.
Yeah, I think simple step infusion is just simply beautiful, just because of its simple. I mean, just works. Yeah. So
that's perfect. Just to add, if you want to correct the pH of your mash, normally you can use lactic acid or phosphoric acid, or even acid malt that you can put in the grist. It will bring down the pH to the levels that you want, but not super necessary as a beginner. But if you want to go a step further, perhaps you can start to look at it, and also start to look at the profile of the water. But I think it's a bit too complex to approach it today. But perhaps in a later workshop, later live.
Maybe later down the road, yeah, indeed.
Yes.
Maybe next time. So
Yeah,
moving on to next question from Christophe Galter, who's asking, when would you steer the mash, during the rest or the rise between the steps?
That's an easy one. No, the need for steering is very much when you're heating up, because you don't want your malt to sediment and drop in the bottom of your tank, and then you heat up right there and it starts burning. Yeah, indeed. And then you'll have a lot of what you call a Maillard reactions. That's like it will turn. It will get darker in color. It will develop new aroma and other aromas that have nothing wrong per se, but you will shift the aroma profile. So definitely shake it, swirl it swirl it when you rise the temperature.
And also sometimes during the rest as well. If you
exactly
do it to shake, just to make sure the moisture is well done. Do it. But indeed, like Antoine said, during the rise of the temperature is very important to make sure your heating element is not burning the grist.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, next question from Julien Amand, who's asking if we also need the 42 and 52 degree for a pale ale beer.
No, not at all. I think we've answered that question like partially already. It is not mandatory. Definitely not the 42. The 42 is very specific to sticky grain. I would say it's if you want to reduce the viscosity a bit. 52 is for proteins. I mean, if you have a good base malts and you don't expect any trouble, no. So you can actually skip them. It will work. I would only advise to use them if you have issues down the road. But no, I think you can skip them if you have good quality malt.
Perfect. I will not answer better than you, Antoine.
Okay. Well, next question we have from Josh Dem, who's asking, what about the water profile?
Yeah, that's what about the water profile?
What about it?
It's a big one. I've got the whole book here just for that question. It's 300 pages. I think it's hard to summarize that question. Yes, there are advantages of correcting your water profile, but there's only so much you can do about it. First, you need to know what's in your water profile, which is not always easy. I guess most people will use tap water. And depending on where you are, the profile can be completely different. So it is something that you can definitely play on. And I know there's a lot of good reads about this, and some component will bring a smoother bitterness. Some component are needed for factors for enzymes, and you need all of this. But it is complex chemistry, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, it's very important. I mean, it's also really up to the person that is brewing. You know, like the water here is different than the water in England or in Germany or in the south of Belgium. So it really depends of where you are brewing. So you need to put you need to know what's the values of your water in terms of minerals, about calcium, about whatever. Yeah, it really depends. It's a bit complex to start to dig into it, but that's a lot to discuss.
But it is nonetheless a very interesting question, because we know for sure. I mean, water is the main ingredient of beer, and it does have an impact, and it's very often neglected. And we know for sure that the water profile in Burton upon Trent, the water profile in Pilsen is not the same at all, and they really end up with different kinds of beer. So it is interesting to have a look at it. But if you're starting with home brewing, I wouldn't bother too much to start with.
Yeah, you guys, when you started homebrew, you didn't check the calcium component of your water and then adjusted the recipe, did you?
No.
Not for the first time, no. I still don't do it when I brew with my friends.
Well, I hope you do it at the brewery.
Yeah, we do it.
That's but that's the effect of terroir, right? You want to brew with the water from your region without changing, right?
Exactly.
Terroir.
All right, we have another question about pH from Gorian, who's asking what pH and at what moment would you shoot for?
Yeah, I think Antoine already answered it, but something around 5.2 to 5.4, that will be ideal for a nice enzymatic reaction.
Yeah, indeed. Don't be. I mean, be careful with when you're playing with those things. Like first, don't put any in your eyes or on your hands. It's a bit nasty. But if you put too much, you put too much. I mean, there's no way back. So just go step by step. Add a little bit, read the pH correct again, and I would do so.
Great. Last question from Julien, who's asking if we absolutely need the 42 degrees Celsius and 52 degrees for 100 pale ale beer.
No, we already answered.
We just had a.
We don't need, no.
No.
All right.
No, again.
So my bad. So
right.
You guys can move on to the next.
Do you have a question? Do you have a question from you yourself, Javi?
No, you know, I'm all about it. I'm well versed in beer already. I work with you all the day, so it's all good.
Could be worse, huh?
Okay.
It could definitely be worse. All right, guys, let's